On today's show, I'll be discussing Asmodee's growing monopoly, Fantasy Flight Games' Star Wars Armada, and Stronghold Games' first Kickstarter ever. Hello and welcome to Chit Happens, the board gaming news show with zero objectivity. Anyway, WizKids has announced that their shipments for HeroClix and Dungeons & Dragons Dice Masters, which I was actually looking forward to, are delayed. What a surprise. They're all delayed. Until they get issues worked out with those ports and importing, we're just going to have issues. The HeroClix have been delayed, I think, a couple weeks, and the Dice Masters, which I was excited about, TBD. So who knows what that means. But in better news, they are going to be rotating resources now out of the Star Trek Attack Wing. So I guess there's now a standard, like Magic. There's a standard for Star Trek Attack Wing because older resources are harder and harder to get, but people who do have them are using them repeatedly. And WizKids, in my opinion, a smart move, have decided that they need to keep the meta moving a little bit. A healthy meta is a meta that is changing. And while WizKids has a history of changing things very quickly, wave after wave after wave, month after month after month, I think that this is good overall. Mayfair has announced that Settlers of Catan is now Catan. That's what it is. From now on, Catan. Okay, fine. I mean, I don't really care. Does anybody care? Some people called it Settlers. Some people called it Catan. Some people called it Settlers of Catan. Those were the least people. I think the most either called it Settlers of Catan. I think I went back and forth. Whatever. But they are going to be holding from April 24th through 26th down in Nashville, Tennessee, a Catan Day. Woo! You can play all the Catan you want. Be part of the world record-breaking Catan game. I think it'll be interesting. I won't be going, obviously, but, good for them. Good for Mayfair, good for Catan. Asmodee bought Fantasy Flight last year and Days of Wonder, and now they've bought Pearl Games and Istari. They're huge. They're getting very, very, very large. The nice thing about Asmodee is that Asmodee at least seems to let everyone just do what they're doing. They're just going, you know what? We're just going to kind of put this all under our title, under our jurisdiction, but you can all publish and do games however you've been doing them, which is great. Okay, if they want to collect companies, I guess everyone has to have a collection of something. That's a way to do it, but at least they're not really getting in the way of the companies they're buying. But it is funny because it was done very, I don't want to say, it was not sneaky necessarily, but it was not something that was announced out there like the Fantasy Flight Games and Days of Wonder, but how could you have hidden those? In other news, Wizards of the Coast has Dungeons & Dragons Temple of Elemental Evil coming out. And for those of you who don't know, back in October at, I think, Essen, there was unveiled the Magic the Gathering strategy board game, which is essentially HeroScape 2.0, as far as I can tell. It uses very similar tiles. It's made by the same teams that made HeroScape and Risk Legacy. I'm looking forward to this. I will buy it the second it comes out. I don't care if it's awesome or not. I love Magic, and if there's a board game of it that's HeroScape in nature, I'm buying it. That's it. Done. Everyone buy it. We can all play. We'll get together. We'll build huge landscapes and whatnot. IDW is reprinting Asmodee's 2004 Fire and Axe, a Viking game for, I believe, 3 to 5 players. Plays around 90 minutes. This is a game that I've heard a lot about and I've always been interested in playing but never gotten a chance to. And now that it's coming out, I'm hoping someone I know picks it up. Any of you? And finally, for our upcoming releases and everything, Fantasy Flight Games has announced more, or spoiled, I guess, more of their Star Wars Armada Wave 1 with the Victory Class 2, which is essentially the same model as the Victory Class 1 that comes in the big box, except it has different upgrades. And then the Gladiator Class Star Destroyers. Both look very interesting. This game, here's my one issue with this game. We have X-Wing, we have Star Trek Attack Wing, we have Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing. Wings of Glory and Sails of Glory and, everything else. And now we have Armada. And I know it's different. It's got the clicker and all of the other stuff. But it's $100 right out. And for those of you hardcore Star Wars people, you're going to buy it. For those of us who like Star Wars but aren't necessarily, $100, it's Fantasy Flight. So the ships are going to look great. The components are all going to be nice. And I'm sure the game actually does play well. But I'm going to need to play it first before I would even consider making that investment. As I mentioned last time, Fantasy Flight Games had spoiled the Warband of Scorn a few days, I think last week at some point, the new red forces for Battlelore. There we go, Battlelore. And for the Uthuk. But the Deccan were actually spoiled back in December, but I missed it. But I am going to talk about it, because blue is the color that I normally play. I normally am the Deccan. And they look way cooler than the base units. I mean, I was okay with the base units. I love that the archers can fire twice if they don't move and everything, but there was too much of a defensive nature, I felt, about the blue, and it did not match as well against the offensive nature of the red. I always thought the red were a little more powerful. And while the new red forces make them even more powerful, the blue forces, the Deccan, the Hefnar Guardians or whatever it is, they look good. The battle mages, really strong from really far away, and the siege golem is ridiculous. The ironbound, especially what I like are the lancers, because that ability to move 3 spaces and trample, I was actually thinking about that for a game, how to incorporate that, and that's perfect. They did it. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And now on to Kickstarter. Let's start with Playroom Entertainment's Unspeakable Words. For those of you who have played it, it's a game where you score points based on the number of angles in the words that you build. It sounds like a fun premise, and it actually gained quite a bit of steam, and it was on Tabletop Season 2, and obviously anything that's on Tabletop gets a boost in sales. But they're kickstarting a deluxe edition. And if you have a game that people already like, do you need to kickstart it to make a slightly better edition? And I know they can be combined. It doesn't get rid of the base game. And they've raised, what is it? They've raised $61,000 out of the $12,000 they needed. So, I mean, they're more than good. But maybe it's just me being me. But if it's only $12,000 to make this deluxe, obviously the support was there. It's $61,000. You've made this game. Stop taking money away from other people who need their game supported. And there's a couple of ways to think about this. You can either think about this as, well, this is a tried and this is a tested game and people like it, so people are going to pay for it, and that's much better than getting burned on something else. Or you can look at it as companies who already have games out trying to improve those games and essentially using up other games' potential Kickstarter money. Novacry. Novacry has had some issues in the past, for those of you who have any history with it, but they, on Kickstarter, have raised 29,000 out of the 10,000 that they need. So they are funded, and they are doing very well, and hopefully this time around everything will get printed and everyone will get burned and hosed. I would prefer to be burned then hosed rather than hosed then burned, unless, of course, the hosing prevented the burning. Either way, Kickstarter, it's a crapshoot. Rise of Cthulhu, a Chuck D. Yeager game, I believe a second game, although I could be wrong, has raised $9,500 out of the $7,000 that's needed. It looks good. I mean, the artwork looks nice, and it's a Cthulhu game without 10,000 pieces. And let's be completely honest, with games like Arkham Horror and Mansions of Madness and Eldritch Horror and all of the other Cthulhu games out there that have 10 jillion pieces, it would be nice to play a game about Cthulhu that doesn't have that many pieces. But it is only a 2-player card game. And to be honest, mechanically it looks similar in some ways to Smash Up. And so it's a Cthulhu Smash Up. But only for 2 players. So I would probably rather get Cthulhu Wars from Peterson Games, which has a bunch of figures and they're all big and really cool looking, if it wasn't $200. Friggin' seriously, $200. Lastly, but not leastly, we have Stronghold Games putting their first Kickstarter out. It is a new Space Cadets. I believe it's called Away Missions. Space Cadets Away Missions. I think it's funded already. Yeah, there's like 76,000 out of the 40,000 that they needed. It is funded. I don't know how I feel about this. You know how I feel about game companies that are established that have games taking money from other people. But it does look like a very cool game. It's another one of those cooperative adventure games like the D&D game, like Mice and Mystics. These things are very popular right now. I'm not going to support it because it's like $100 for a copy. And no. But something that was really funny is they said up to 100 plastic minis. or miniatures, Up to 100. What does that mean exactly? Do you not know how many there are supposed to be in the game? Are you including stretch goals? I don't know what's happening. But other than that, sounds really good. And obviously, now we come to not a game, but other game reviewers. The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower has reached its final stretch goal at $160,000 for this 2015 season. That's a lot, since 60 was their base, and this is for a game review show. I'm obviously very happy for them and for all the stuff they're going to be able to do. What is interesting is that Tom Vassell did not put any more stretch goals. He said, you know what, if you want to give more money, awesome. All that money is going to go towards making the show better. But we've promised so many things at this point that I don't want to start promising more things and not be able to deliver on it, which I think is actually very responsible and intelligent. A good way to run a Kickstarter. Because if you are promising things that you know you're not going to be able to, or you think you might not be able to, don't promise those things. Because if they get funded, that looks really bad on you. So, congratulations to the Dice Tower, obviously. And I believe that is it for this episode of Chit Happens. I will see you next Saturday with more news when it arrives. So go out and play some games, and have a great week.